Do you ever feel like you see too much? Like you walk into a room and you can feel everything, every unspoken tension, every hidden agenda, every carefully constructed lie that everyone else seems to buy into without question? And people look at you weird when you point it out, like you're the crazy one for noticing what's right there in front of everyone's face. You try to play along. You try to just accept things the way they are. But something inside you won't let you. It's like you're allergic to bullshit, and the world is one giant allergic reaction waiting to happen. You've probably been called too sensitive, too intense, too much. You've probably been told you overthink things, that you should just relax, just go with the flow. But here's what nobody tells you. The reason you make people uncomfortable isn't because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something right with you that threatens everything they've built their lives on. If you're tired of feeling like an outsider in a world that demands conformity, if you want to understand why your empathy feels more like a curse than a gift, then stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will change everything about how you see yourself and the systems trying to control you. There's something unsettling about watching the world and knowing that most people are performing rather than living. You can see it everywhere once you start looking. The co-worker who laughs too loud at the boss's jokes. The friend who posts their perfect life on social media while falling apart in private. The family member who keeps repeating the same toxic patterns and calling it tradition. And you see all of it. You feel all of it. Not because you're trying to, but because you can't not see it. It's like everyone else is watching a movie and accepting it as reality, while you're the only one who notices the cameras, the scripts, the directors telling everyone what to do. And the loneliness of that awareness is crushing, because you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unfeel what you've felt. You try to connect with people, but there's always this distance, this sense that you're speaking a different language. Even when you're using the same words, they talk about their problems, and you can see the deeper patterns, the systems that created those problems, the invisible chains they don't even know they're wearing. But when you try to point it out, they get defensive, they shut down, they call you negative or cynical or too deep. So you learn to keep quiet. You learn to nod and smile and pretend you don't see what you see. But that pretending, that constant self-censoring, it's killing something inside you. It's like being asked to cut off parts of yourself just to fit into spaces that were never designed for people like you. And here's where it gets really painful. You start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too much. Maybe you do overthink things. Maybe if you could just be normal, just stop analyzing everything, just accept things at face value like everyone else seems to, then you'd finally be happy. So you try. God, do you try? You try to be less sensitive. You try to care less. You try to turn down the volume on that inner voice that won't stop, pointing out the inconsistencies, the hypocrisies, the injustices that everyone else walks past without a second thought. But it doesn't work, because what you're experiencing isn't a personality flaw or a thinking problem. It's something much deeper, much more fundamental. You're seeing the matrix, to use a tired but accurate metaphor. You're seeing the mechanisms of control that keep everyone locked in their assigned roles, playing their assigned parts, never questioning who wrote the script in the first place. And the system, the structures of power that run our world, they absolutely cannot allow people like you to exist freely. Because empaths who think critically, who feel deeply, who refuse to look away from uncomfortable truths, they're dangerous. Not because they're violent or destructive, but because they see. And when you see how things really work, you can't be easily controlled anymore. Michel Foucault spent his entire life studying how power works, not the obvious power of kings and dictators, but the subtle, invisible power that shapes how we think about ourselves and each other. And one of his most profound insights was this: the most effective form of control isn't physical force. It's getting people to control themselves. It's creating systems where everyone becomes their own jailer, their own judge, their own disciplinarian. He called it the internalization of surveillance. Think about the panopticon, that prison design, where a guard in a central tower can watch all the prisoners, but the prisoners can never know if they're being watched at that moment. Eventually, the prisoners start acting as if they're always being watched, even when they're not. They police themselves. They discipline themselves. The guard barely has to do anything because the prisoners have become their own guards. And Foucault showed us that modern society works exactly like this. We've all internalized the watchtower. We all carry around invisible judges in our heads, constantly monitoring ourselves, correcting ourselves, making sure we stay within the lines that someone else drew. But here's the thing about empaths, especially lone empaths who've learned to trust their own perception. They can feel when they're being watched. They can sense the mechanisms of control, even when those mechanisms are supposed to be invisible. They're like people who can see the walls of the prison while everyone else just sees normal life. Most people, and this isn't a judgment but an observation, they've been so thoroughly trained by these systems of control that they don't even recognize them as control anymore. It just feels like common sense. It feels like the way things are supposed to be. You go to school, you learn to sit still and be quiet and raise your hand and wait your turn. You learn that there are right answers and wrong answers, and the right answers are whatever the authority figure says they are. You learn to compete with your classmates for gold stars and grades and approval. You learn that your worth is measured by your productivity, your compliance, your ability to fit in. And if you question any of this, if you resist any of this, you're the problem. You're the difficult one. You're the one who needs to be fixed. Then, you grow up and enter the workforce, and the same patterns continue. You learn to perform enthusiasm for work that drains your soul. You learn to smile at people you don't respect. You learn to swallow your authentic reactions and replace them with appropriate ones. You learn the unspoken rules. Don't make waves, don't challenge authority. Don't point out when the emperor has no clothes. And the really insidious part is that everyone around you seems fine with this. They've accepted it so completely that your discomfort with it seems abnormal. But empaths, they feel the cost of all this pretending. They feel it in their bodies, in their nervous systems, in that constant low-grade anxiety that comes from living out of alignment with their deepest truth. They're like canaries in the coal mine, feeling the poison in the air that everyone else has learned to tolerate. The system doesn't know what to do with people who feel too much, because feelings are inefficient. Feelings are unpredictable. Feelings make people ask questions like, why are we doing it this way? Or does this actually make sense? Or what if there's another way? And those questions are dangerous because once you start asking them, once you really start questioning the fundamental structures of how society operates, you might start imagining alternatives. You might start refusing to participate in systems that harm people. You might start valuing your own inner knowing over external authority. And that's terrifying to any system that relies on compliance. Foucault talked about something he called technologies of the self, the ways we're taught to work on ourselves, to improve ourselves, to become better versions of ourselves. But here's the trap. We're taught to improve ourselves according to someone else's standards. We're taught to become the kind of person the system needs us to be, more productive, more compliant, more normal. And when we resist that, when we insist on becoming who we actually are rather than who we're supposed to be, we're labeled as problems, as too sensitive, as not tough enough for the real world. But what if being sensitive isn't a weakness? What if feeling deeply is actually a form of seeing clearly? What if your empathy is showing you something true about the world that others have learned not to see? There's this thing that happens to empaths who start to wake up to these patterns. They go through a phase where they try to save everyone. They can see so clearly how people are trapped in systems that hurt them, and they want to help. They want to wake people up. They want to show them the invisible chains. But this is where another painful lesson comes in. You can't wake up people who are determined to stay asleep. You can't save people who aren't ready to be saved. Because for most people, seeing the truth about how controlled they are would require them to completely restructure their understanding of their own lives. It would require them to admit that maybe they've been living according to someone else's script, that maybe all those sacrifices they made, all those years of doing what they were supposed to do, maybe it wasn't leading them toward anything real. And that realization is too painful for most people to bear. So they attack the messenger instead. They attack you for making them uncomfortable. They call you arrogant for thinking you see something they don't. They call you negative for pointing out problems instead of just accepting things. And slowly, Painfully, you learn that you can't save anyone. You can save yourself. You can only commit to your own liberation and hope that by living authentically, by refusing to participate in the lies, you give others permission to do the same. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Sarah, though that's not her real name. Sarah worked in corporate America for 15 years. She was good at her job, really good. She could read people, understand what they needed before they knew themselves, navigate complex political situations with grace. Her empathy made her an incredible manager. People loved working for her because she actually saw them as human beings, not just resources to be optimized. But Sarah was dying inside. She could feel the disconnect between what her company claimed to value and what it actually valued. They said they cared about people, but they measured everything in quarterly profits. They said they wanted innovation, but they punished anyone who challenged the status quo. They said they valued authenticity, but they expected everyone to perform a very specific version of professionalism that had nothing to do with who people actually were. And Sarah could feel all of it. She could feel how her colleagues were slowly hollowing themselves out, trading their aliveness for security. She could feel how the system rewarded conformity and punished genuine humanity. And she tried to change it from within. She really tried. She advocated for better policies. She pushed back on unrealistic expectations. She tried to create space for her team to be real human beings. But the more she pushed, the more resistance she met. She wasn't being a team player. She wasn't understanding the bigger picture. She was too idealistic, too soft, not tough enough for the business world. Until one day she realized the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. And she had a choice. She could keep trying to fix an unfixable system, slowly eroding her own soul in the process. Or she could leave. She could choose herself. She could choose her own aliveness over the system's approval. So she left, and it was terrifying. It meant letting go of security, status, the whole identity she'd built around her career. But it also meant breathing again. It meant no longer betraying herself 40 hours a week. It meant discovering that there were other ways to live, other ways to work, other ways to be in the world that didn't require her to cut off parts of herself just to fit in. So what do you do if you're one of these lone empaths who can see the systems trying to control you? First, you stop trying to fix yourself. You stop trying to be less sensitive, less intense, less you. Because your sensitivity isn't the problem. Your intensity isn't the problem. The problem is systems that require you to numb yourself in order to participate in them. Second, you get really honest about what you're actually feeling and why. Not what you're supposed to feel, but what you actually feel. Foucault talked about parrhesia, the ancient Greek concept of speaking truth to power. But it starts with speaking truth to yourself. It starts with admitting that yes, this job is soul-crushing. Yes, this relationship requires me to pretend to be someone I'm not. Yes, this entire setup feels wrong even though everyone else says it's fine. That honesty, that willingness to name what's actually happening, it's the first step toward freedom. Third, you find your people. And here's the hard truth. Your people are probably not the people you grew up with, or the people you work with, or even the people in your family. Your people are the other weirdos and misfits and sensitives who also can't stop seeing what they see. They're scattered and they're rare, but they exist. And when you find them, when you connect with other people who also refuse to pretend, something in you comes back to life. You remember that you're not crazy. You remember that your perception is valid. You remember that there are others who also live in the space between what is and what could be. Fourth, and this is crucial, you start building a life that doesn't require you to betray yourself. This might mean leaving jobs that demand your soul. It might mean ending relationships that require you to play a role. It might mean completely restructuring how you survive in this world. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it means giving up security. But here's what they don't tell you about security. The kind of security that requires you to abandon yourself isn't actually secure. It's a slow death dressed up as responsibility. Real security, the kind that actually sustains you, comes from knowing you can trust yourself. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens externally, you haven't abandoned yourself internally. It comes from building a life that's aligned with your deepest truth, even if that life looks nothing like what you were told it should look like. Fifth, you practice what Foucault called care of the self. Not self-care in the bubble bath and face mask sense, though that's fine too, but care of the self as a political act. Care of the self as the practice of creating yourself, rather than accepting the self the system wants you to be. This means paying attention to what actually nourishes you versus what you've been told should nourish you. It means experimenting with different ways of being. It means giving yourself permission to change, to evolve, to become someone you never imagined you could be. Because you are not a fixed thing. You are not a completed project. You are a constant process of becoming, and you get to participate in that becoming consciously, rather than just accepting whatever shape the world wants to press you into. And here's what starts to happen when you commit to this path. When you stop trying to fit yourself into systems that were never designed for people like you. You discover that your sensitivity, your empathy, your ability to see what others don't see, these aren't weaknesses, they're superpowers. They're forms of intelligence that the system doesn't recognize because they threaten the system's control. You start to see that you weren't meant to function well in these structures. You were meant to help dismantle them, not through violence or force, but simply by refusing to participate in the lies, by insisting on your own authenticity even when it costs you, by building alternatives, however small, to the dominant ways of being in the world. You start to understand what Foucault meant when he talked about practices of freedom. Freedom isn't something you achieve once and then it's done. Freedom is something you practice daily. It's a constant negotiation between who you are and who the world wants you to be. It's the ongoing work of noticing when you're contracting to fit into spaces too small for you and making the choice to expand instead. It's the courage to disappoint people, to fail at being who they need you to be so you can succeed at being who you actually are. The truth is, lone empaths terrify the system not because they're powerful in the traditional sense. They don't have armies or weapons or money. They terrify the system because they refuse to believe the lies that keep everyone else in line. They terrify the system because they can feel when something's wrong, even when they can't articulate exactly what it is. They terrify the system because they keep choosing themselves over the collective illusion, and every time someone does that, it creates a crack in the facade. It shows other people that refusal is possible, that there are other ways to live, that you don't have to accept the world as it is. And that's the most dangerous idea of all. The system can handle rebellion, it can handle anger, it can handle people who want to smash things. What it can't handle is people who simply withdraw their participation, people who look at the whole setup and say, no thanks, I'm going to do this differently. People who stop trying to be successful according to someone else's definition of success and start defining success for themselves. People who choose aliveness over achievement, authenticity over approval, truth over comfort. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not broken or wrong or in need of fixing. You are exactly what the world needs, even though the world doesn't know it yet. You are the person who can see through the lies because you feel their weight. You are the person who can imagine alternatives because you can't stomach the way things are. You are the person who might, just by being fully yourself, give someone else permission to do the same. And that permission, that example, that refusal to participate in the diminishment of human beings into cogs in a machine, that's how change actually happens. Not through grand revolutions, though those have their place, but through individual people deciding they'd rather be authentic and alone than fake and surrounded. Through people like you who keep choosing the harder path of truth over the easier path of conformity. The system wants you to feel isolated. It wants you to think you're the only one who feels this way. It wants you to believe that your sensitivity is a liability and your depth is a problem. Because as long as you believe that, you'll keep trying to fix yourself instead of questioning the systems trying to control you. But you're not alone. There are millions of us scattered across this world, feeling too much, seeing too much, refusing to look away. And every time one of us chooses authenticity, Every time one of us refuses to betray ourselves for belonging, we make it easier for the next person to do the same. We create tiny cracks in the structures of control. We prove that other ways of being are possible. So keep seeing what you see. Keep feeling what you feel. Keep refusing to pretend. Because the world doesn't need more people who are good at following rules. It needs more people who are brave enough to question why those rules exist in the first place. And that's exactly what you are.